I'm bored. Let's read a book. Oh! Magister Cassius was black, and I didn't mean he wore black. His skin was a blue-black that glistened in the sun or the shadow. His short curly hair was black, and his eyes were black. Squarish, he stood more than 4 cubits, like a heroic black oak carving. The only things light about him were the whites of his eyes. He did have a sense of humor, of sorts. "Do you favor suicide or murder, Larus?" His deep voice rumbled. "What? Huh?" Once again, he had caught me with my thoughts elsewhere. Wondering this time about how the cliffs I could see through the open window had been made so black and so sheer. After all, just like old Magister Kerwin, he was pounding on about the basis of order. "I asked you whether you favored suicide or murder." Crystal, sitting cross-legged on her pillow, suppressed another giggle. She had on the blue smock-like tunic and trousers, with sandals, and she looked dusty. But that was because her clothes, pressed clean as they were, had been washed so often the blue had faded away in spots. Tamara continued to look at Cassius as if he were an insect under study. Over the gray tunic she had draped a vivid green scarf. Each day the scarf changed, but not the clothes. Either that, or she had a bunch of gray tunics and trousers. Samuel looked from Magister Kerwin to me and back, and then sighed. I wondered how I would escape this time. "Neither," I finally answered. "Both are very disorderly." From the corner of my eye, I could see how Tamara shook her head. Cassius almost sighed, perhaps the most fallible gesture I had seen from the Brotherhood. Then he continued. "We were speaking about order, a topic about all of you have been exposed to since your birth. Unfortunately, for various reasons, such as Larus's boredom, Tamara's equation of order with male dominance, Samuel's compassion for those unable to accept order, Crystal's unwillingness to concentrate, and Rin's contempt for weakness, none of you can accept order as the basis for society." I grinned, not really caring if I had been a target with the others. I watched his gentle barbs bring the group alert. But I wondered why he had not said anything about Merton. Cassius turned and jabbed the short black wand he carried at me. "Larus, you find order boring. Tell us why. Stand up. You can walk around and take as long as you want." I eased off the brown leather pillow and stretched, conscious that even Tamara was looking toward me. I ignored her, or tried to. I didn't like being studied like a bug under a magnifying glass. Order is boring, everything the same. Every day in Recluce, people get up and do the same things. They do them as perfectly as possible for as long as possible. Then they die. If that's not meaningless and boring, I don't know what is. Rin nodded, as did Merton, but Tamara's ice blue eyes were hooded. Crystal suppressed a musical giggle and wound her long black hair around her fingers, letting the tips brush her feet as she watched from her cross-legged position. I didn't know what else to say. After all, what I had said was obvious, so I stood there. No one else added anything. "Larus, suppose, for the sake of discussion, there is a kingdom somewhere in this universe." "Universe?" "Sorry, just imagine another world. One where people have all the children they want, without order, without rule. One where every generation, for no apparent reason, all the kingdoms go to war. The young men wear their armor and carry their weapons, and 1/5 of them die. Some kingdoms win, and some lose, but the only real result of the wars is that the weapons become more terrible and more effective. More children are born, more go hungry, and more of those who reach maturity die in the wars. Cassius paused and looked over the group of us. All of you think this imaginary world, not just Laris? I didn't think long. So what? So people died. People always die. Laris, did you know that 5,000 people died in Southern Hammer last year? I shook my head. What did 5,000 deaths in Hammer have to do with an imaginary world? What did the imaginary world have to do with boredom or order? Do you know how they died? Cassius' voice rumbled. No, how was I supposed to know? They starved to death. They died because there was no food. Rin, sitting back against the black oak that paneled the lower half of each wall, pursed her lips. Anyone could die without food. I nodded. Do you know why there was no food? No. Does anyone here know? Was that the rebellion? Asked Hammer. She seemed amused, as if she knew where Cassius was leading us. I wondered how she knew about a rebellion in Southern Hammer. And who cared? There was food in Western Hammer, Cassius added slowly. Enough food that the price of grain was lower than in years. Merton looked puzzled. Yes, Merton? Cassius acknowledged the ferret-faced man with the unruly hair as thick as Buffalo's coat. Couldn't they have at least smuggled some grain? The Imperial Army blocked the roads. Some grain was smuggled, a great deal in fact, but not enough to compensate for the fields burned by the Emperor's troops. There was a moment of silence. Laris, has one person ever starved to death in Recluce? I don't know. Darned if I would admit the point, although I wasn't sure which point I wasn't about to admit. So, you are saying that avoiding starvation is boring? That having happy and well-fed people is boring? Would you prefer to live in Hammer, where the lack of order leads to rebellions, oppression, and starvation? Is death preferable to boredom? Of course not. My voice was louder than it should have been. But you are saying that boredom is necessary to avoid deaths or some kinds of evil. That's what I don't accept. I never said that, Laris. You did. I started to open my mouth, except Hammer snorted. Laris, try thinking for once. Crystal giggled. I glared at her. She didn't look at me. Rin did, but she was shaking her head, even as she stretched out those long, shapely legs. No one said anything. Finally, Magister Cassius sighed. A real sigh. All right, I demanded. Would someone explain to dumb Laris? You're not dumb, snapped Hammer. You just refuse to see. See what? Laris, rumbled Cassius. Order is necessary to prevent evil such as starvation and murder. Would you grant that point? I nodded. Yes. You find excessive order boring, you said. I had to nod again. Do you see the difference between the first point and the second? I must have looked blank. Everyone was shaking their heads. Cassius took a deep breath. Honest order prevents evil. That is the truth of life, and also of magic. On our earth, that truth approaches a fact. He paused. All right, I admitted, still wondering why he insisted on a difference between truth and fact. You call excessive order boring. That is a personal value, judgment. When you apply that boredom to order, you are the one who says that boredom is necessary to avoid evil. Boredom is not a component of order. It is only your reaction. Boredom is not necessary to prevent starvation. Order is. You just find that order boring. Magister Cassius was just twisting words. Too much order was still boring. You all have a problem similar to Laris's. continued the black man in black. Tamara, you find order a tool of men. Therefore, you refuse to accept our way of life, totally because order accepts the valid differences between men and women. You feel that women can do anything, if not more, than men can. We can, murmured the redhead, so low that no one seemed to hear it except me, although she was across the room from me. My hearing seemed to be getting better, or perhaps I was more alert. Tamara smoldered, but kept it hidden. I slipped back down onto the brown leather pillow. The magister smiled faintly and turned. Rin, continued the black man implacably, with his eyes turning toward his next victim, you feel that strength is the answer to all problems, and that, given enough effort, anyone can be strong. Your philosophy would leave infants and the sick to grow, or die as they could. That's not true. Rin straightened on the pillow, her brown-flecked green eyes turned cold. Then, Magister Cassius smiled, would you explain it for us? Feel free to stand or walk around. I watched Tamara, as graceful as a dancer, yet wound with a steel inside that would have dulled the sharpest blade. Her flame-red hair framed a freckled face that almost looked friendly when she was not speaking. She turned toward me, caught my eyes. I felt a cold dash of water had been thrown across the room at me. And I looked toward Rin. Everyone has an obligation to be as strong as they can be. It isn't right for the strong to have to take care of those who refuse to be strong. Rin hadn't stood for her cushion, and her hands were clenched into fists. She looked down at the knife sheet at her belt. What do you mean by strong? Asked Cassius in that low, rumbling voice. Rin looked at the polished black oak floor planks, then at Crystal, and finally in the general direction of Merton, who seemed to shrink further into the corner. Merton always seemed to put himself in a corner when he could. A corner from where he could watch everything. The room grew silent. You know what I mean. You just play with words. Rin's voice was harsh. I agreed with her assessment of Cassius. Of all the magisters and masters, all of them played with words, twisting their meanings, hiding more than they revealed. Come on now, Cassius' voice soothed. You feel that strength is important. What kind of strength? Is a bully to be admired? Would you despise a small woman who required aid to stop a thief? I don't admire bullies. I don't think much of people who invite theft or attacks. And I don't like thieves. Each word came forth filled with grit. Rin glared at Merton, who for some reason looked away. So you feel order should rest solely upon strength and self-discipline. I know what I feel. Rin glared this time at the magister. Fair enough. Cassius actually chuckled before wiping the smile from his face and turning toward Crystal. And you, laughing lady, why do you fail to pay much attention to order or to anything? Crystal didn't even look up at Cassius. She giggled and played with her long black hair. Crystal, the blooming voice turned cold. Even I shivered. Crystal looked at the floor planks. It doesn't help to pay attention. Things happen anyway. Thinking doesn't stop them. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Rin sniffed loudly. Then you agree with Rin that violence is the only way in which evil can be stopped? Sometimes. She lifted her weight and looked at me. What do you think, Glarus? I wish she hadn't made that unspoken request, and especially that Cassius hadn't caught it. I coughed, trying to figure out what Crystal had really meant. At least sometimes it seems like a perfectly good people can't do anything against evil or against accidents. And sometimes, I recalled the baker, people seem to be punished or exiled from Recluce just because they don't meet some unseen or unspoken standard. I guess I see that as unfair, and that because they can't understand or aren't strong enough, they get punished. Do you think life is basically fair, or that brotherhood has the obligation to be fair to an individual, when that fairness could threaten the safety of all Recluce? I hadn't seen that happen. I haven't seen any threat of that nature, but I have seen people who were not bad people exiled or punished. Cassius smiled sadly, glancing from Crystal, who refused to look up, to Ren, who glared at him, and back to me. In the corner, Martin licked his lips. Is living in Recluce a right or a privilege? Cassius's question hung in the air like a spell. You're saying it's a privilege, that we have to meet certain conditions, I snapped. That's fine, except no one ever explains the reasons behind the conditions. Just mind the rules, maintain order and banish chaos, and don't ask questions that we don't want to answer. I take it that you don't find the explanation satisfactory. You're right, I don't. And I don't think most of the people in this room do either. So the Emperor has no clothes. Cassia's voice was lower and softer. No clothes? What Emperor? What clothes? This philosophy is all very inspiring. But how does this prepare us for Danger Guild? Tamra's voice was cutting, and she had stood up. Sit down, and I'll tell you. None of you are likely to believe me, but I'll tell you. I shrugged. So did Rin. Tamra glared, but she sat back down. Cassius waited until the murmurs died away. It's really quite simple. Against perfect order, it is impossible for chaos magic to prevail. Recluce is based on maintaining that order. Some people are order sources, some people are chaos generators, and some people can be either. Most people selected for Danger Guild are either uncontrolled order sources or could generate either order or chaos without knowing it. The first step in Danger Guild is to recognize that all of you have the ability to allow chaos a foothold in Recluce or to keep it from Recluce. You have to choose which, and the Brotherhood is not about to let you make that decision unless you're being watched and checked or unless you're outside Recluce. Since Recluce is not a police state, the best option is to let you see the rest of the world, or some of it, while you learn and decide. Police state? That was an odd way of putting it. Only Hammer had police. For a moment, the room was still. So you just throw us out for Hammer or Kandar to murder and everything stays fine with the sheep who remain? Rin's voice was tight. Hardly. The current Emperor of Hammer is the grandson of a Danger Guilder who preferred the southern reaches and who was quite successful in taking over the province of Merwi. The head assassin for one of the major power came from Sigil. Not that at all far from here. Cassius shook his head. Believe me, the rest of the world will reward many talents. You're in the greatest danger if you believe in order and reject the Brotherhood. His eyes flashed towards me. That's because you become a walking order source in the realms of chaos and a threat to the Chaos Masters. You're saying that because we have talent, we have to leave Recluce until we master that talent? Asked Samo. Not until you master it. That could take years. Until you decide within yourself your own course of action. I almost bit my tongue. It was even worse than I thought. If I didn't accept the Brotherhood's stiff-necked order and rules, I'd be thrown to the wolves. And somehow, I didn't exactly see myself as a Chaos Master. Why wouldn't a ethical person use both order and chaos? Life consists of both. What about... The questions went on, but I didn't pay much attention. Everyone was just asking the same things with different words, so I was an uncontrolled order source, or worse, and no one was describing what that meant, except it was dangerous to Recluce. My stomach growled, but no one heard as they argued with Cassius. Crystal and I sat there in a quiet island. She looked at the floor, I looked at everything, and saw nothing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, comment, and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you never miss out on any of these videos. See you on the next one. Goodbye.